Now, I noticed that Bruce Keene is doing some interesting work in solar as well, and maybe when we get a moment, you can speak to what's going on in Keene in the area of solar. Okay.
Should I go?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I do have to apologize. I've just walked in from an eye appointment, and they put some drops in my eyes, and everything is really, really blurry. So if I'm squinting very awkwardly, it's because I'm having trouble seeing.
Hey, at least your camera works. I can't get mine to work. I went to Windows 11 and now it doesn't work. I have to buy a new camera.
You might regret that my camera works. I think I'm not sure how many of you were at the presentation from a month or so ago, but my name is Melissa Elander. I work for Clean Energy New Hampshire as the North Country Energy Circuit Rider. And oops, why can I not go down? Oh, there we go. So what that means, if just in case anybody isn't familiar with the Circuit Rider program at Clean Energy New Hampshire, and I think our new Circuit Rider program manager, Sarah Brock, is here as well. Circuit Riders work in a very hands-on way, providing technical assistance, grant writing assistance, really sort of whatever assistance is needed to communities and schools in helping to move energy projects along. So it could be from solar, it could be heat pumps, energy audits, LED lighting, and anything in between. So I'm going to just give you a quick overview today of some of the solar projects that I've worked on in the North Country and what I have seen that has worked for North Country communities. And I do want to just be very, very clear up front. I know there is a lot of interest in the state on some of the larger projects that are being talked about and in some of the initial stages of development. And so, thinking of 500 kilowatts, a megawatt, up to 5 megawatts, and how to structure those. This is a pretty new area. The expansion of net metering in New Hampshire really opened up a lot of opportunities for communities. We at Clean Energy New Hampshire are also learning about that and trying to, sort of distill the information. And then we will get back in touch with this group when we have something to present, when we have learned enough in order to present it. So what I'm going to be talking about today are really projects that are 250 kilowatts and smaller, because that's what my experience has been in. And part of that is honestly because in the North Country, we're very restricted by our transmission grid. So there has been interest in some larger projects, but they have, most of them have just fizzled out when the developer does some initial research into the capacity of the grid. So unfortunately, that's where we're at. So I'm going to talk about capital reserve funds as one tool that I have seen as very effective for some of these smaller projects. I'll give you some examples from a few of the communities that I've worked with. And then I'll just talk a little bit about my approach to working on solar with towns and schools. So again, projects that I've worked on have been as small as 15 kilowatts up to 240 kilowatts. I'm primarily doing a building by building approach with these projects, rather than looking at, sort of one very, very large project to offset a number of accounts. It is very often that we build one project that will be behind the meter, say at an elementary school or a public works garage. And it does overproduce, and so it can group net meter to a few other accounts, but we're working on a relatively small scale. And I've primarily worked on projects that are owned by the community, although one exception is the largest project, which was the 240 kilowatt power purchase agreement.
So question here, Alyssa, do you know if there's a limit to the group net metering overflow?
I don't know the answer to that, actually. What do you mean by group net metering overflow?
Well, you just mentioned that you do one behind the meter, and then the overflow you group net meter to other municipal buildings. I wonder if there's any limit on the ability to do that.
Good question. Not that I have ever encountered.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to make a note to ask that, though. So I've worked with some towns that have chosen to do some solar projects over a number of years in phases, while others have completed multiple arrays as one project. And I just want to say, I think, solar is a little bit of an uphill battle in communities. Even where you have the support, you will always be dealing with, sort of one hurdle after another. And so, the quickest one that I've worked on has been an 18-month project. And we just installed one that took 5 years. And that was an 80 kilowatt array. So, nothing gigantic. And it really did take 5 years, almost to the month. So these really do take a pretty significant investment of time. But on almost all of the projects that I've been a part of, while we've been working on solar, we've been able to check a lot of the efficiency boxes as well. So that's been great. So I don't know if this is just in the region, where I'm located, but I still encounter this mindset of solar doesn't work in New Hampshire. Of course it does. And we now have so much evidence that we can point to. And sometimes this, and this is just in the North Country. There are, obviously we can provide so many other examples from around New Hampshire. And sometimes, for energy committees during their public outreach, in being able to reference all of these other communities that have solar, that are making this work, that are actually seeing savings, is really helpful. So these are just some of the projects that I've been involved with in the North Country. Capital reserve funds. I do want to talk about capital reserve funds. This is something that I started doing almost right away in 2019. And it first came onto my radar because Stratford, the town of Stratford, had actually identified a capital reserve fund that was no longer needed. It was for a police car, and they had actually dissolved their police department. So they had $35,000 sitting in this capital reserve fund, and they repurposed it to be a solar capital reserve fund. I find that these are relatively easy to get passed. You don't have to do a ton of public outreach to get them passed. And they have been funded from $1,000 up to $100,000. And then I'll give you one example, but this capital reserve fund, in the case of Randolph, has been key to helping them be able to move forward with solar, because they funded it one year, continued to fund it the next year, and then they have a considerable pot of money to be able to put towards their solar array.
Thanks. Got it?
So I'll provide you with a couple of examples of capital reserve funds. This is the one from Jefferson just this past year. Voters approved creating it and funding it with $100,000. This is pretty boilerplate language.
Sure. Okay.
We can provide you with some examples of capital reserve funds that your community could replicate. And then the town of Whitefield in 2022 chose to create and fund theirs with $1,000. I think that once it's created, there's a lot of benefits. You can continue funding it year after year. If you were to complete a project and be able to obtain the elective pay incentive, maybe you go to your select board and advocate for putting that elective pay incentive back into your solar capital reserve fund for a future project. So I think creating it and funding it with anything, any amount, is a really good step forward. So just a couple of examples. I know I've talked quite a bit about the USDA Community Facilities Grant and how I have been able to leverage that with a number of communities in the North Country. It is an income qualified grant. So not all communities in New Hampshire are eligible for it. Quite a few in the North Country are, and it has been key to moving quite a few projects forward. But I wanted to present some examples of projects in communities that haven't been eligible for that grant to see how they have made this work. And we are, again, talking about smaller projects here. So the Randolph Town Hall and Library, they began working on solar. It was actually very late 2021 that they began working on solar, but they, evaluated municipal usage at all the accounts. They identified sites, they obtained quotes, and they've issued an RFP. And they are going to be moving forward with solar in 2024. They, in 2023, created and funded their capital reserve fund with $20,000. Another $20,000 was just added last week, I guess. And so now with the combination of the New Hampshire Commercial and Industrial Incentive and the 30% elective pay, they will be able to move forward with their 25 kilowatt solar array to offset the usage of their combined town hall and library. And, you know, as they were sort of slowly checking off all the boxes towards solar, they upgraded the lighting in their town hall. They did street lights. They have 8 street lights, so this wasn't a huge project. They did an EV ride and drive, and sort of an offshoot of their energy committee did work on community power, and the Randolph did just adopt community power. And they also performed an energy audits and pretty considerable weatherization upgrades at their municipal facilities. So, you know, I think, you know, taking a long approach to solar, it really isn't a bad thing. It is a, you know, it is a very expensive decision for a town to make. And these were all really great wins that the Energy Committee was able to accomplish along the way, and really establish some credibility with the community. Shelburne Town Hall. This project was, I think, 16 kilowatts. And the Energy Committee was very small. It's 2 people. They actually, interestingly, did not start this project with full support of their select board. It was a 3-person select board. 2 people were pretty cool towards the project. 1 member of the select board was in favor. But they just committed to going to, they got the permission from the select board to do some research. That was the first step. And then they just went to every select board meeting and provided an update to the select board every week. And every decision that had to be made, small or large, was brought to the select board. And it was, of course, the select board's decision as to how to act, often with, you know, input or recommendations from the Energy Committee. But what it did was it really gave the select board, it brought them along throughout the whole process, and it gave them some ownership of the project as well. And this really became clear because they had a number of public informational meetings ahead of the town meeting vote. And one of the select board members, who was actually not in favor of the project at the beginning, had been so well educated and become such an advocate for the project that she was actually standing up and responding to some residents who were voicing some concern about this project. So, you know, somebody who had not been in favor of the project was now an advocate because the Energy Commission had done, or committee had done, such a great job of bringing the select board along at every stage. And this project was financed through just a local bank. This was when interest rates were very low. They did receive a small New Hampshire commercial and industrial incentive. I think it was around $3,600, $3,500. But they were able to get a very low interest rate, and they structured the loan so that in year 1, when all expenses were incorporated, so, you know, insurance, saving for inverter replacement, things like that, they were coming out very slightly ahead in year 1. So they were trading their electricity bill for a loan payment and coming out $60 ahead in year 1. But, you know, it just gets better from there as electricity rates are projected to increase at 1.5% to 2% per year. So that's how they structured their project. It has been very successful. It has, you know, the select board sees the support, sees the benefits of that, and is now supporting their fire station array as well. The town of Bethlehem, I just want to mention this town, they did get a 35% USDA community facilities grant for this project. It was done as one project, but 3 separate arrays owned by the municipality. So, you know, the 35% helped enormously. And then what the Energy Commission did, and one key aspect of this Energy Commission is that it includes a select board representative, which is just, it's great. Wherever an Energy Committee can do that, I would absolutely say if you have a select board member who's willing to come on board, it just helps so much with communication and information sharing and really like laying the groundwork both ways. So they decided to structure the remaining cost of the solar arrays as actually 2 warrant articles over 2 years. So they were going to go to the voters in 1 year to ask for about $150,000, and then they were going to go back to the voters the next year with asking for another 150,000 because they didn't want to put too much strain on the voters in 1 year. They didn't actually end up having to do that because this was prior to ARPA, and it was also prior to elective pay. So after they went to town meeting the first time to request $150,000, during that following year, they were actually able to get some ARPA funds. They were able to factor in elective pay because these projects were built in 2023. So they didn't have to go back to the voters a second year, but that is how they structured the original warrant article. And they were put in the awkward position of having to do public outreach during COVID ahead of town meeting. So I think they did something really, really great, which was, and I would recommend it for any community, COVID or not. They put together a 3-minute video presentation. And it was not, professional and slick. It was really sort of, community members talking to community members in a very relatable way about the benefits of the project. And the link to that video is actually still on the town's website. I can send it out to anybody who would be interested. You don't need money to make it. Very basic skills in movie editing would be sufficient. My approach when I'm working with towns and schools on a new project, we do an inventory of the electricity usage and the municipal properties. We look at the available land, taking into account whether there are wetlands, if it's a floodplain. Because I'm often working with grants, typically we just avoid those areas. We also look at the age of the roof and the orientation of the roof. Many cases, I suggest completing a structural assessment of the roof if we have sort of narrowed our options down to a roof. Often, again, that's because we want to apply for a grant with that stamped letter from a structural engineer in hand. That is always a part of the process for roof-mounted solar arrays. We do it a little bit ahead of time. And again, communication with the select board. If this is not being led by the select board, communication with the select board is key at every step. And if you can get a select board representative on your committee or commission, that's really, really great. And again, in my region, I am a big advocate for starting small, not starting with a megawatt of solar, even though we are typically limited by our transmission grid for those size projects. But I think starting small it's a really great way for energy committees, commissions to learn about solar and to educate the community, to educate their select boards, and also the benefits of building solar behind the meter, particularly, under 100 kilowatts are just huge. It's easy to see those benefits. It's quick, and it's a relatively quick and very rewarding win for an energy commission to then, maybe leverage that to doing a larger project in the future. So that's what I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Melissa. That helps a lot. There's a lot of things strike true there. We did here in Bristol a 350 kilowatt array at the wastewater treatment facility. It took me 2 years to get that done. First year, presented it at town meeting, presented it to the people, and they wanted to study it a little more. So I was able to get some money to do a study, and I was going to ask you about that. In most of these cases where they've been successful, I suspect somebody has predicted the energy output, looked at the dollars, and done an economical analysis of benefit, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, the economics help because it's hard to, hard to lie or hard to debate. I suppose a better word is hard to debate good, solid economic analysis.
And it's very helpful to present that, to prevent, even the most cautious prediction to the voters.
David's got his hand raised. David Cunard.
You're doing great work, Melissa. It's appreciated. What is the elective pay program, and is it available to all communities?
Elective pay is available to all communities. It's a program included in the infrastructure legislation. Basically, what it does is it expands the tax incentive that businesses and homeowners have been able to get for years to tax exempt entities like, yep. Or you
Okay.
might know it as direct pay.
Yes. Okay. That's,
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. They made it really confusing by changing the name sort of partway through.
Let me ask, where would you go to get a study made? Who does these studies?
You mean a sort of a financial study?
Yeah, to when the town, I don't know, this sounds like a lot. Well, how about just this much money to do a little bit of a study and see if we can
Yeah.
see what we're in for?
That's a good question. We have a spreadsheet at Clean Energy New Hampshire that was created internally that I use for smaller projects. This really is only appropriate for under 100 kilowatts. I've also worked with some very tech savvy energy committees who have actually written, in particular, one wrote his own computer program to do that analysis for the community. So I don't know how you could get that done on a larger scale, or who you would go to pay for that, unfortunately.
When we did it in Bristol, we used a third party, a consulting company. What happened was during the town meeting, there was a recommendation to let's go study it some more, of course. And there was some discretionary money that we had set aside for something else, and they said, well, let's just take it from here and do it. We used a company called Acuity, ACUITY Power Group.
Okay.
And they did an excellent job, including predicting. They did multiple scenarios as well, because we didn't know at the time whether we wanted to do big array, small array. So they looked at different sizes, and they used a modeling tool to predict the solar output. And then they did analysis with respect to money on what they would produce in the future. And what's kind of nice is that they were a little conservative, and we've beat their first year estimate. So we were able to come back the first year of operation and say, yeah, the study was good. It was a little conservative. And in fact, we've exceeded the expectation of the first year projection.
That's great. I really appreciate Paul having being able to refer folks to somebody. I'll look into Acuity.
ACUITY. Did a nice job. I'd be willing to share that study with anybody who would like to see it.
Can you put it in the chat?
Well, it's a PDF, and it's kind of hefty to put in a chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. The name of the company, sorry.
Oh, yes, sure. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Paul, I would love to see that example. If you don't mind sending it to Melissa and or I, it's always helpful. Communities ask all the time for examples. And if you don't mind sharing, then we can put it in our resource bank.
Yeah, certainly will.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Sarah's put the link to Bethlehem's 3-minute video in the chat and elective pay.
Great. And Patsy's got her hand up.
Yes, I also have a question about elective pay. I was wondering if you've actually seen any of that come back to any of your towns, because I've heard that the people installing the panels have to have somebody employed as an apprentice, and the panels have to come from somewhere specific. I'm wondering how difficult the process is. And I'm also asking because I'm helping a nonprofit get some of that money. So I just wanted to check about the details of that.
So there's if a project is a megawatt or larger, yes, they do have to satisfy certain apprenticeship requirements, and I think it's the Buy American requirements, but there is that 1 megawatt cutoff. So I'm not working with any projects that are a megawatt.
Okay.
But if you are under a megawatt, you basically, the IRS has sort of created an exception to those requirements. The process just opened. The IRS, it went into effect in 2023. the IRS just opened sort of the portal and outlined the process at the beginning, within the last, I think, probably 6 weeks. So no, not enough time has gone by for anybody that I've been working with to actually receive their payment. It is a multi-step process. Sarah has been working really hard on trying to distill all of that information and try to make it as ordered and understandable as possible, and that we will continue updating that. I've worked with communities that have completed the pre-registration step, which is the first step. You put your project into operation, and then you complete the pre-registration. You wait a certain period of time, and that's where a couple communities are right now in the waiting period. I believe that they will be receiving a registration number, and then they use that number to actually complete their tax return.
Wait, I know what you
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah. So that's, so it is moving along in some communities, and I have not received any indication that they are not going to receive payment. So
Thank
The
you.
only other thing that's relevant for anybody who's trying to do this on 2023 solar projects is that there's some automatic extensions that take into place for projects that were completed in 2023. If you do get that pre-registration filed, they automatically kick your deadline to actually file the tax return to November. And that's just for folks that had projects completed in 2023. And I think it's an acknowledgement that this process is new and they're giving everybody extra time. But the pre-filing registration is critical for anybody who's got a project completed last year. That should be underway.
I will say the IRS has created, they do office hours as well. So if you get into the process and you're running into a challenge, we can probably connect you to a list of office hours. The town of Stratford had a pretty amazing experience. The administrative assistant was working through the pre-registration steps, ran into a challenge, and emailed the IRS email address that's listed for questions. Somebody at the IRS emailed her back right away and said, I'm going to give you a call. And he actually picked up the phone and gave her a call to answer her question. So, I do think that there is right now anyway, there seems to be help. And I think it's going to be a good program.
Great. Thank you so much. A wonderful presentation. Thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, Melissa, this is Dick Henry. Wonderful presentation, really terrific job. I would just add sort of one rule of thumb, and that is that when you do your study and you figure out how much your building is using, it's a conservative and wise idea to scale your solar array to essentially the demands of the building. Because although we have, various forms of net metering at the moment, where excess can be sold back to the grid, we're seeing lots of issues with connections. And I think, in my personal opinion, the utilities are going to be working hard over the next 5 to 10 years to try and eliminate a fixed price for net metering, and we'll go to a wholesale time of day price for net metering. So if you're running your calculations and you think, oh, I'm going to get 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour for everything I sell back, that could easily drop to 0.5 cent or 1 cent in a few years. So if you design the system so that it can handle essentially the demand of the building, you're always going to be ahead.
Yeah.
But if you try and do more than that, it becomes much more problematic. So that would be the only thing I would add to your presentation, which I thought was excellent.
Thanks. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but thank you. That's really good advice.
Now, the one we did in Bristol, Dick is right. We went through the math on this and found that at the time, group net metering wasn't that advantageous. So we sized it to match the demand of the wastewater treatment facility and put it behind the meter. That is the safest way to roll, because you get to consume all you can without having to pay transmission distribution charges associated with it. However, PPAs, and by the way, a PPA is a nice tool because you don't have to go to town meeting and wait for warrant article. You can work with the select board. It's no cost to the taxpayer, so you can sometimes get that through without a town meeting, which means you can do it off cycle or off, or at least it's a little easier to do. Now, the problem is PPAs are harder to get these days because interest rates are higher. So to have the third party be able to make $1 on this thing has become a little more, and still provide an economical rate for the consumer, the purchaser, has become more difficult. But the PPA was something we used. It worked really well. Let's just go around. I know, Carol, I think you were the one struggling with getting solar accepted in your community. Is that true, Carol Sullivan?
Yes, we had, it was primarily due to the location that we chose to have the solar array. And there were on either side of that location, it was a town-owned field, but it was behind a church on one side and behind a small neighborhood on the other side. And both parties objected to having to look at solar panels. And it was also downtown Center Harbor, where the municipal building is right on one of the bays of Lake Winnipesaukee. So you can see it quite easily. So people liked to look at the lake, and they thought that this would interfere with their ability to look at the lake. There was also a great deal of pride in the fact that the town is considered to have some historic buildings and has a historic sense and kind of a quaint village type feeling to it. And so people objected to that. We had 3 public hearings, and the people who attended the public hearings were pretty much all against it. And so that was discouraging, and it also ended up discouraging the select board. So that in the end, 2 out of 3 of the select board voted against the warrant article. So that was some of what we experienced. So I have more details on the project itself, but you know, I don't want to take up too much time because there are other people that might want to give input. And so far, this has been very helpful to me. Thank you, Melissa. It's really great. So, and Paul as well. So.
I thought you did a good job, Melissa, talking about positioning. It's important, I think, to keep this whole thing from being a partisan discussion. Solar often becomes a partisan discussion. Anything associated with renewable energy these days seems to become sometimes a partisan issue because people resist it. And, you know, doing nothing is really easy. It doesn't take any change on anybody's part. So, you know, the people who want to do nothing will do it. And I think you're spot on with, let's keep it focused on economics. Let's keep it focused on lowering price. There is going to be an NIMBY issue. Carol faced that a little bit. Now, you know, that's always going to be there, I think, because, you know, solar panels aren't beautiful to look at, windmills aren't beautiful to look at, you know, whatever. There are downsides to all forms of energy production.
Right.
So my advice, keep them focused on the topic, stay away from the partisan debate, and just focus on the topic of cost, I think, is the primary thing.
Yeah. I mean, we had looked at this happened to be a ground mounted solar array in a field that was between the church and this one small community. And we had looked at other locations that were both close to the municipal building, such as rooftops, and the roofs were halfway through their lifespan. So there would have been extra cost in replacing the roof before we put solar panels on it. And another potential place was the old town dump that had been covered over. And that did not have adequate power on the road that dump was on. So we would have had to go to added cost to put in something like, I believe it was 8 power poles with, you know, the proper power in order to get that electricity that was being generated out to, you know, either the town or to New Hampshire Electric Co-op. And So, I mean, these are still possibilities. There's one other possibility. So now that the project actually did fail at the town meeting last week, and so now that it has failed, we are going to go back to this select board and ask them if they want to explore other possibilities and what those costs would be and what the difference would be in production. And or if or whether we should just can this project for now and concentrate on other energy saving projects.
What about regional or county projects?
Well, this is a town energy committee. So, I mean, I can get involved in, regional projects, but I think we have a 3-person energy committee, and I don't think there'd be an interest in getting involved in a regional project. I mean, I could through the network, if there was something that came up because of my experience so far, but I'm not sure that the other 2 would be interested. Also, just wanted to mention that our energy committee was fortunate to have one of the selectmen be part of the energy committee, and Melissa had mentioned that. And so that was good, and that select person was the only person to back the project in the long run. So, and he, as Melissa said, it's a very valuable experience to have a select person be very involved. And, having worked for a lot of different organizations in the past, I know the importance of teamwork and having people that can give of their knowledge to a team project and be honest with each other and share from their past experiences. So I say, be very careful on, if you're thinking of putting up a solar array somewhere, to make sure that you have management or selectmen or mayoral support for the project, and stay in touch all the way through, just as Melissa said, stay in touch all the way through. So, which we did. But we had 3 public meetings, and each one was attended by more naysayers than yay-sayers. So that's, in the long run, how the select board got kind of discouraged about the project.
Yeah, they're vocal. The critics are vocal, and the advocates are sometimes not as vocal as I'd like them to be. We face that in our town as well. I did notice that the town of Bow, there was a piece in the Concord, the town of Bow is implementing a 6-megawatt array. They're doing it in a couple of sections. One of them is over their former waste area as well, where they're putting a 3-megawatt array there. And then there's another one, and they're going to group them together. I haven't been able to talk to anybody specifically who's from Bow. I did live in Bow, but I don't live there now, so I'm not able to speak to anybody specifically about that project. Does anyone know anything about the Bow project?
Our colleague, Katrine Casper, who's the Seacoast Circuit Rider, has been working pretty closely with Bo in the last couple of months to prepare them for that town meeting. She hasn't briefed our whole team yet in what she learned through that, but she was doing that in part because we've had a lot of interest from communities, especially in her region, trying to understand the options for building out larger projects. And what Bo did with this lease agreement is a path, and one we really want to better understand to be able to help towns be informed and understand how to do this. So my suggestion, and we were talking about this on the team call early this week, is that we might want to have another session of this group specifically about larger projects, and we would want Katrin to be there for that, to sort of share what she's learning, because it's not just Bo, she's trying to investigate what options are available to communities kind of across the board. And we can chat with her about when she thinks she'll have enough information for that to be a useful conversation, because as Melissa mentioned, this is pretty new for everybody, and I'd
love to touch it next month, Sarah. We try to do this once a month, just to kind of a roundtable to find out what's going on, what others are doing.
Okay. Let's pencil that in and I'll talk to Katrina. If for some reason she thinks next month would be a bad idea and has a better idea, we'll let you know, but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other
Dave?
Hi, Paul. Hey, Paul, if I could just add a couple cents in there.
Sure, sure.
As probably nobody on this call knows, but in my background, I spent 15 years using sheep to control vegetation under transmission lines and kudzu in Florida and so forth and so on. So I have a lot of experience in dealing with vegetation control using sheep. And when you move from a rooftop unit into a large scale ground mounted system, vegetation control becomes a big deal and an expensive part of a project. And, you know, right now they're in Texas and New Mexico and Oklahoma and all along the southern tier of states. There are enormous utility scale projects going in that are anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 acres. And there's one in the Midwest that's going in at 32,000 acres. I mean, these are really big systems, and vegetation control is a big deal. So I know a lot about that. I do some consulting with folks that are using sheep to control vegetation under solar arrays, and I would be happy to participate in any future discussion of ground mount systems. The other point I would make is that schools, be they local or regional, particularly elementary and middle schools, are excellent sites for solar installations because of the law that requires that no first through, I think, second grader or kindergarten through second grader can have a classroom on a second floor. And so you end up with kindergarten, first and second grade on the first floor, and in some cases, third grader, fourth grader, fifth graders on the second floor. So you get a big, wide, flat building, usually out in the middle of nowhere. So there's very little shading, and you solve a huge number of vandalism issues because second graders, unlike seventh graders, don't climb up on roofs. When you get into sort of 8 through 12, it's a different kettle of fish, and different things happen from a vandalism standpoint. But the vandalism comparison between roof mounts and ground mounts is another very significant thing to keep in mind. So if I can help in any way on that, I'd be happy to talk about it in future.
Well, it would be fun. It would be great to have you just hit that topic in a future session, Dick, where you talk about vegetation control, because ground mount is often, you know, from a pure yield point of view, ground mount is very attractive. We did ground mount in at the one we did at wastewater treatment here in Bristol, but you are right. You have to cover, in this case, they covered the ground with plastic and put wood chips down. I mean, that's not the greatest solution with respect to the environment, because you're creating an impermeable layer there on a bank of a river. So, you know, that's not perfect. And vegetation control is an issue for ground mount, no question about it.
Right.
David's got his hand up.
Use sheep, never goats. Okay. I agree with Mr. Duck's.
I'm sorry, Dick.
Well, phone duck Henry.
I know I screwed up my entry of my name, but it's Dick Henry, and I
Well,
totally agree. It's sheep.
I agree that with your earlier statement that one should always, when providing solar for a single customer, serve the load of that customer. I would actually say slightly less than the expected total load of that customer. But group net metering is something that I've just tried to understand in New Hampshire. In my 13 years of practice in California, it was never possible to have one site supply energy on behalf of another unless it was an immediate neighbor of the same ownership. And by immediate, I mean bordering a different property under the same ownership. I have on behalf of some municipal customers in Tamworth, reviewed the proposals of private companies for solar on library and town hall that were offering to put in essentially 10% more than the load and expecting Eversource to pay for that extra net year over year. And I don't think that's possible. And I think long run, whether it is possible in the short run or not, I think in the long run, one cannot count on that for savings going forward. Do you agree, or am I missing something in this community or group net metering rule in New Hampshire?
I don't think you're missing a thing. I totally agree. The group net metering, we've made quite a bit of progress here in New Hampshire on it. So it's a little more liberal than you experienced in California. And it's been sort of tweaked every year for the last umpteen years, so that now if you're in the same service district, you can group net meter. And so a school district that might have multiple buildings in multiple towns, but is all under Eversource, you can still, if I've got this right, and you know, the folks from Clean Energy New Hampshire may be more up to date on this than I am. That you can set that up, but I do think that it's very vulnerable to political legislation. And you know, if you're projecting a 25-year life for your solar and you're expecting 25 years of net metering income, that's a fool's errand, in my opinion. You know, you might get 3 to 5 years, but sooner or later, we're going to go to time of day pricing. Now, the one thing that makes this change and become much more attractive is when we start getting affordable storage. And if we can get to the point where we can get affordable storage, affordable, safe storage to complement solar, then that opens up a whole nother set of arbitrage opportunities and so forth and so on. And at that point, you become an asset to the local utility, because you can help them avoid some of their very expensive transmission costs under ISO New England.
Right.
But you know, that's a whole nother topic that we could spend a lot of time on, and probably is too far into the weeds for this discussion.
Thank you. We are just updating the group. Tamworth is successfully marching forward to become a member of CPCNH, a successful vote last week and in our town meeting. And we are also continuing to pursue potentially linking up for municipal meters only, municipally owned meters only, with a provider of a large solar farm, and get some essentially net energy billing from that. And we're hoping, fingers crossed on a possible, we'll build it on our own piece of ground, but that's further away into the future. So we're still active in this and want to participate with this wonderful group. Thank you.
So Dick's absolutely right. The opportunity down the road for us is mixing solar with storage and intelligent controls to make these buildings and municipal buildings and schools potentially assets to distributed energy resources. That's really where we're headed with this whole thing. A discussion around solar was really just topical for now, because with respect to this group, because I'm interested in learning from each other, because things are changing quickly here, and I'd like to learn as we go. One of the things we used in the project we did here in Bristol is called a pilot. I don't know how many of you realize that or understand that. It's payment in lieu of taxes. That's what they call a pilot. Now, we've got some private land here in our town, and I understand that they're going to try to put in a fairly large array and use a pilot, a kind of program to compensate the town. This is another source of revenue for the town, offset taxes. This makes taxpayers happy when essentially a business. That's what this is. They're power generators. They come in and establish an array and pay either taxes directly or payment in lieu of taxes. Now, the taxes in our town, as most of you know, is crazy. It's $500 per panel, believe it or not. And it is tied to the assessment of the value of the property. So the way it works is that number of panels times 500 added to the basis of the value of the property, and then you're taxed at the rate that the town taxes property at. Okay. I tried to get that defeated at town meeting last year and was voted down because, you know, I had everybody against me, including the select board, who wanted the revenue. But we do tax solar in our state. This was a rule, by the way, that was put through without much of a vote. It was done by the people who do property assessment at the state level and just kind of provided guidance, is how I learned about this. They provided guidance to local assessors, and guess what? They took the guidance, $500 a panel. This idea of revenue generation, offsetting taxes in these local towns is a positive influence to doing these kinds of things. It's another form of business. It is a nice form of business for the town in the sense it doesn't draw traffic and it doesn't cause pollution in the sense of emission, things like that, and has the benefit of revenue generation and tax offset. So the way they do that is usually with a pilot agreement as opposed to tax, because the tax numbers just get to be way too big for anybody to make it pencil out if you're going to do a large solar array.
Oh, I'm sorry. A while ago I put in the chat the Potential Energy Coalition org. They just are good at coming up with words to use so that you don't, to try and keep it out of the political arena, to be able to say, you know, we just don't want to get too hot. Or, it's real common sense kind of language, but it might not raise political hackle. So I thought that was a pretty interesting website, potentialenergycoalition.org.
Also, to David's point, Town of Bow, we did pass warrant article by 4 votes, by the way, to join a community power coalition in New Hampshire. So we did get that by. We did have the critics show up and they were vocal, but fortunately we had enough of the advocates there to get it by on a 4-vote margin, simple majority. So we're going to be looking to community power to help us with all of these things as well. And
perhaps in the towns where it gets voted down, Carol, like yours, people realize, oh, you mean I needed to go and vote, and next time round they will.
according
Go ahead, Paul.
According to Andrew Hatch, who is my contact at Community Power, there are 24 towns voted yes at town meeting just recently in March. So we got 24 more towns, and 6 towns have launched in Cheshire County. So they've got to be in the range of 50 now, 50 towns in Community Power.
Yeah, I've been in touch with Kathy Thorndike from Sandwich, and they recently had a vote on solar, and it didn't pass, but they have something in their bylaws whereby, due to the ratio of pros and cons, they can have another vote on it. So they're having another vote on March 30th. And you know, she had similar, or their energy committee had similar problems with it. I think theirs were a little bit more financial problems than ours. Ours were more aesthetic, although financial played a role in it too. So.
Yeah, I did hear from Kathy on that point. Yeah.
In Tamworth, we emphasized energy savings and local control and local option for those who want to vote for higher green energy, but in that order of priority.
Right.
Saving money.
Yeah, that's where I went to. Yeah. All right, it's coming up on the hour. I'd like to keep these to just 1 hour. This is primarily just a place for us to communicate about what we're all working on and share best practices. So I don't want to belabor it. Unless anybody else has anything to say, I'd like to go back to working on data centers.
If it's okay for me to share your email with everyone, could you just put that in chat? Because I haven't shared, I haven't heard back from enough people, but folks are hoping that they would know how to contact each other.
But I have one question. Thank you, Melissa, very much. Is your North Country territory that covers part of Carroll County as far south as Tamworth or not?
I have worked with Gabrielle a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm funded by an organization that supports sustainable economic development in Coos and Northern Grafton County, but we recognize that there are not circuit riders in many parts of the state, and so we provide definitely some assistance where circuit riders are missing.
Cool stuff. Thank you again.
And we are hoping to expand so that there's somebody everywhere.
Let us know when you want a recommendation.
Oh, thanks.
All right, I think that's good. Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for hosting it.
Thank you, everyone.
Susan.
Hello, Susan.
Oh, hi, Donna. Hi, Catherine.
Yes.
I'm just,
I tried to raise my hand, but I don't know
I'm
what I was
sorry, I
doing
saw it,
wrong
but
here. No, that's okay. I had put in the chat the Jessica Dunbar is the contact
Ah.
for Bo with her email, and I think it's the Bo Energy office telephone number. And I had wanted to mention that Concord also passed it, and they had 100% of the city councilors were for it, which was wonderful. And also my sister-in-law's commissioner in Merrimack County, and they passed it for Merrimack County. And there's another county too. And it seems to be, I'm not sure, but their target audience may be smaller towns that, I mean, when you look at Canterbury, and yes, you have Howard Moffett that lives there. So, and you had a lot of energized people, but there are other small communities that maybe want it, but you know, it might
I
just
was
be.
wondering if that would work for Carol, but I guess my question wasn't phrased right, or
Where does Carol live?
she's
Or
in Center Sandwich.
okay. Anyway, I'm gonna try to find out the other county.
Okay, well, I thought Cheshire and Sullivan, aren't they? Is that right? Or
Merrimack was one of them, so you think there's three then?
I don't know.
Okay.
Cheshire was already on when we did the event in Derry, and I thought I heard that Sullivan.
The whole county?
Yeah, remember Terry Clark's was the speaker?
Yes, but I don't remember because I don't know.
I think that's what it was.
Too much information in here. Anyway, but I will find out. I'm more of a written person than I am oral. Just the way I am. Anyway.
Well, I actually took notes this time, and I hope we have a recording. Hey, and we've got Dick Henry.
Okay.
Hello.
Oh,
What's up?
it's still going.
Hi, Donna. Hi, Carol.
Hi. Susan, did you copy the chat? There were some
I will.
links.
I shall.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew you would, but you know.
No, I forget quite often. Okay.
You know,
Okay.
one thing I didn't mention because I had spoken enough in the meeting, but one of the real advantages, I think, of these community systems that are getting up and running, along with some of the other commercial aggregators, is they may be an interested party in buying power from a bunch of these solar arrays. And they may provide essentially a competitive market to the sort of conventional Eversource, Unitil, Liberty kind of guys. So that's something to look forward to. We'll see how it develops.
Well, it sounds like that's sort of on the docket for next time.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Good.
I hope this is a useful place to come together and share notes.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's really great. And, Paul Bemis and I work together all the time, and it just so happened that I got one of your emails and thought I'd participate today, and I'm very glad I did. And Melissa did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. If you can, spread the word around, because,
Yep.
Ultimately, I think net metering only happened because towns banded together and said to Concord, look we all want this.
Right.
And so it's wonderful that people can share their experience, but also if the need arises with more voices, we have a little more heft if we need to use it.
Right. And as we move into storage and good controls, I think the use of time of day pricing will be a much more lucrative solution for small owners of solar than net metering. And so we may end up in a funny position in a few years when we're saying, no, we want time of day pricing, not a fixed net metering, because the price of electricity, if you look at the ISO New England site, can jump from $20 or $30 a megawatt hour to, $600 to $5,000 a megawatt hour. You don't need too many of those hours when you're selling back to the grid to make your project pencil out for the whole year.
Right.
So anyways, that's down the road and more complicated stuff, but I think this is a really good group, and everybody's working hard at it. It's making progress.
I feel like I'm learning, but thank you.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot.
Sure.
And take care and keep
You
up the good
too.
work. Yeah.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. I won't keep you, Susan.
Okay.
5 o'clock,
Yeah.
do you have anybody helping you, or do you need anything?
If you're on and you want to help, fine. I don't know if there's a waiting room, but I think Rob is probably doing his own introduction.
Yeah, he probably does.
Yeah.
See, that's what I was thinking now. Sometimes people are just have it all covered, so anyway, but I didn't want you left high and dry.
No,
Anyway.
thank you. If you're free, come on early and let them know you're there.
Okay, I might, yes.
Okay.
And okay, thank you.
See you again soon.
Alrighty, bye.
Bye. I'm glad we had a good turnout.
Yes, and don't beat yourself up, because there's so many there are many that have already done this, and we just came after the
Yeah,
town the
the
town
Unitarians and
the town groups, and they voted, so
Yeah.
the next group will come. And anyway, but it's just not, it's wonderful that people offer to do this and help people.
Well,
I mean, that's why it spread so fast. Seriously, if it weren't for Zooms,
Thank you,
etc.
COVID. Thank you, COVID.
Anyway, and Howard Moffett helped Concord, boy, he really helped them. So it's good. It's all good.
I just feel like since we talked to Haley and then I heard that webinar this morning, I don't know if you heard that I was on a cooperative extension did a webinar about data collection on a shoestring.
No, I didn't see that.
Well, it'll be on video, but it's through cooperative extension, which I don't know how I even happened on it, but it
I
was
know.
really, really informative. So anyhow, I took minutes and I wrote down how many people and what the date is. And I just want this group to be successful. There's no other place where people talk, and it's only once a month. And that Friday thing is slender. And I don't know if Gabrielle is still interested in this. Supposedly we're having a meeting the first Thursday of every month. We haven't talked about that. I don't see that happening. I don't know.
For what?
Well, we've got two subgroups, the
Right.
legislation on Fridays at 2,
Yes.
and this thing, third Wednesday at 3.
Right.
But
That's
before
energy.
before we created those two subgroups, we said the Energy Working Group, and that it would have a meeting. Let's just stick with the first Thursday of every month. I think that was at 4. So I don't know if that's still happening. So I guess I will email Gabrielle, Paul, and Chris and see if we want to meet at that time or not, or if I should email the whole group or just let it slide.
Okay, for the energy
Yeah,
group. And was this part of the energy group that
yeah,
that
this
did
is
this?
considered, this is called the energy,
Okay,
the,
okay.
the municipal energy committees subgroup of the energy.
That's it, municipal, and I knew it had a distinction, and
But, you
I
know,
don't know, I think I'm gonna
initially,
make some sort of little chart because I'm visual.
well,
Okay.
I don't know if there's enough momentum or interest or hunger to meet yet again in the month.
Oh, for municipal or for the,
For the parent energy working group,
okay, all right.
which has 90 people on its, or 70
Okay.
people on its Google group.
Okay,
I'll email them and they can ignore me and then I'll let it go.
yes, yes.
I don't think I want to send it to the whole group and look stupid or.
No, and is Chris one of the leaders
Well,
of the?
no one, Gabrielle Watson was the one person that sort of took up leadership. And then she had all these family disasters and she came to Paul's thing on building
Mhm.
and
Yes.
she was
Yes,
in
I
an
remember.
email with Carol Sullivan about today, although she didn't come on now,
Okay.
but she does have a day job. So I feel like
Right.
it's not intrusive to email her now. And I don't know if I should email the whole committee, you know, is there anyone that wants to keep going? Or just leave it where it is and we can grow later if people want it.
So when have they had a March meeting? They've one a month? The
Well, that was,
energy,
yeah, that was, well, the meetings have been the air quality thing that Chris Skoglund did.
Yeah.
And then the funding thing that Melissa and Elizabeth McKenna and Nora did, and then the building codes thing that Paul did. So our energy working group meetings have been presentations,
which is fine. I mean, it's good use of the time.
but I don't know if there's
You
any.
might, why don't you
hunger.
just, yeah, why don't you just ask like Chris and Gabrielle and don't email the whole group, but
Yeah.
it's your choice. Either one is fine, but
No, I don't want to look crazy. So I'd rather keep it to people who already know I'm crazy.
no, but they would, Chris would understand and Chris would probably
Yeah.
like a day off. I mean, he had some time off. He's busy too, so
Yeah.
anyway.
But see if
So,
Gabrielle,
you-
see if she's back again with energy.
mhm. But you had mentioned, Friday. Are any of the meetings on for legislation this Friday? Because they had put, I thought Chris had put one off until April after.
Oh, I haven't even thought ahead that far.
Okay,
No, you're right. Clean Energy New Hampshire said, we'll see you in April. So
yes.
I'll have to check with Chris
Okay.
if he wants to do today, or this, if he wants to do the intervening March Fridays.
Mhm.
And if he
yeah.
says no, should we not meet? We don't have much to say.
Unless I was going to get on now for a few minutes and then I have to go downstairs and look to see. I had the bills for this week, what's on the calendar for next week, but they usually don't put it out till Thursday, so I can do that by Thursday night. Friday morning, I'm bringing a neighbor to the doc. She's going for cancer treatments and she needed a ride
Okay.
Friday morning, but it shouldn't be. I'll be back by lunchtime. And I couldn't do the last one 2 weeks. Oh, so I felt bad. Anyway.
Okay, and for what it's worth, Friday, I've got a meeting in the morning, but I'll basically be home around.
Yeah. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, that was really nice. I'll write Paul with a thank you too.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. That's wonderful.
Okay.
Very positive. So thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Get out, go for a walk. Pull some weeds.